Hello, my name is Milan Kazarka, and here I would like to talk about certain things from the product ownership area, which I find are oftentimes omitted when you see product owners in some organizations talking on YouTube, or things that are omitted in some explanations online that you can find, and what's important for product ownership. Most videos, most texts, and most people who are doing product ownership explanations, product ownership courses, they tell you that the most important thing is an agile feedback loop. It's researching the market, it's researching your existing clients, users, doing testing, integrating that into product development, testing it, or testing prototypes, making decisions, implementing features, testing them back, etc., etc. But there are also things that are left out of this discussion, which I found, if left out, are sometimes problematic for companies. One of the things that I feel is oftentimes left out is that it's very important to create an organizational awareness in a company. You need to create an environment, you need to create processes where each and every person who's doing product development, each and every designer, each and every community manager knows why we are implementing features. They need to know what's the essence of our product, how it works, or even why are we asking users, customers, certain questions and questionnaires to move forward. There needs to be an understanding, because if there isn't, then oftentimes you can get pushback, or people just aren't aware why are they building certain features, or they might not be in line. And if you explain yourself, or if you have a theory or an assumption based on some facts that you want to start implementing a feature, if you go through this phase of explaining that to your product development team, then they themselves might have some information, some feedback, where there might be new information. They might have a different view, which leads you to going back to the customers, etc., or thinking twice about it, right? So you need to integrate the feedback of your whole company. And as I said, you need to create a link between the customers and the product development. I don't believe that as a product owner that you should just bring decisions to your product development team, right? I don't believe that you can omit the reasoning behind doing certain decisions, because then everyone might ask themselves why we are doing this work, right? So there needs to be a sort of a link. That doesn't mean that every single person wants or is able to talk to a customer, but behind every decision there needs to be an explanation, right? And this is oftentimes called an agile feedback loop. And you might see all sorts of different visual representations of a circle, how you gather feedback, how you go through, to showing some visual prototypes to the people from whom you gathered feedback, to development, to feedback again, etc., etc. But also the important thing is to seamlessly integrate this agile feedback loop. So you shouldn't just be doing it once, and it also shouldn't be a pain, right? And also, if you figure out that there are some problems with this loop, then you also need to change it. Many companies are using tools like user testing or Try My UI that are mostly usable for B2C. If you have B2B, then you need to create, like, how do I gather feedback from my users, from my customers, if they are businesses, how do I approach them? At the moment when a customer comes back to you and says, this wasn't working for me for the last half a year and I will cancel my subscription, that's too late, right? I'm not saying that that's completely irreversible, but that's too late. In many companies, the people who are talking close to the customer is the community team, right? Many smaller startups, you don't have a community management team, but you just have sales who are also the community managers, or sometimes that's the role of your account manager, right? The important thing to do is to figure out how to stay connected with your users, right? So that things don't come abruptly. And once you get feedback, then you need to value each idea that the customer might have. You need to value each pain that they are having and look at the bigger picture. If a client has a request for a feature, then you need to ask yourself, what's the cost of this feature? What's the impact that this feature will have on the whole product? What's the risks that we are taking? Will it just be usable for this one client, or will it be usable for more clients, or is it a universally or something that will be universally used? You need to also test your assumptions, because some things, as we know from UX UI, some features you put straight in the face of users, some features you might not. Some companies might make decisions to have a completely separate product if they figure out that that works on the market, some not, right? There are many things to assess here. So as I said, like, you need to be able to assess opportunities, right? Is this a good opportunity? Does it make sense? Is it valuable? What's the risk management of that? But you also need to mix in, which I've also seen omitted in some product ownership discussions. You cannot omit taking in trends, looking at the competition, and also looking at the internal stakeholder knowledge. So you can't just have a loop where you just go to customers, ask them questions. You also yourself need to be proactive, and you need to look at the competition, the market, and you need to have a sort of a pre-existing vision, right? Where you think the market is going, where you think your product is going, and present this to your customers. Not to just be very passive about this approach. And this helps, the last point, this helps to fight a certain fatigue, because if you always just go to your existing clients, existing users, and ask them, how are you doing? Do you have any ideas for some things, or could you validate an idea that we gathered from another customer, which you need to do in a smart way? They might think that you cannot come up with things that they themselves would say, oh wow, this is something that I wouldn't think about. People want to have this wow moment, right? So on one hand, of course, you need to iterate, you need to always make your product better. You also need to figure out some innovative things that you might present, innovative features, right? They might be something, or they might not be anything. But you're not working in a bubble. You're working in a market, right? So what I wanted to show is that essentially nothing works in an isolated way. No process is fully functional in an isolated way, right? So going to your users, gathering feedback, if that's completely isolated from your product development, then that's bad. If your agile loop only works with feedback, if it just in a very sterile way asks for feedback without looking at the market, without looking at the trends, without looking at the competition, then it's bad. If you take every feature, if you don't measure cost, impact, if you don't measure risk, then you're doing a bad job. Then you end up integrating like everything that's thrown on you, right? So what I try to say here is that nothing exists in an isolated way. Everything should be interconnected. You need to look at all of the different elements to make decisions. You can't just cut off certain departments, cut off certain decision making. And that's, I think, what is oftentimes sort of omitted from these talks, from these product ownership descriptions. And yeah, this is the first video that I'm making. I'll try to put some other thoughts into a video. Yeah, over and out.